The Last Thank You, Paul Hogan's final project and farewell to fame at 85 years old. When most people his age are content to rest on their achievements and fade quietly from public view, Paul Hogan has embarked on perhaps the most meaningful project of his entire career. It's not another blockbuster film or television series. It's something far more precious and rare in an industry obsessed with profit and celebrity. A genuine, heartfelt thank you to the millions of people who made his extraordinary journey possible. This is the inspiring story of how a man who once seemed broken by scandal and loss found new purpose in gratitude, new strength in vulnerability, and new meaning in using his remaining time to honor the relationships that truly matter. It's about the courage required to say goodbye gracefully, the wisdom needed to recognize what deserves celebration, and the profound satisfaction that comes from completing a life's work with authenticity and grace. What drives someone who has already achieved everything most people dream of to risk one final creative endeavor when their body is failing and their energy is limited? How does a man transform personal regret into public service? And how can the act of saying thank you become the most important performance of a lifetime? This is the remarkable story of Paul Hogan's last gift to the world, and the world's last opportunity to witness greatness that transcends entertainment and touches the deepest truths about human connection, gratitude, and love. Chapter 1: The Spark of an Impossible Dream. The idea came to Paul Hogan during one of his morning vigils on the Venice Beach balcony, as he watched the sun rise over the Pacific and reflected on a life that had brought him more joy and sorrow than any single person should have to experience. It wasn't a grand revelation or a bolt of inspiration. It was simply the quiet recognition that he had something important left to say, and time was running out to say it properly. Paul Hogan expressed a desire to complete one final project to thank his fans before officially retiring, but this modest description cannot capture the profound courage required for someone in Paul's condition to contemplate undertaking any creative endeavor, let alone one that would demand everything he had left to give. The project began not as a commercial venture or ego gratification, but as a moral obligation. Paul's growing awareness that the millions of people who had supported him throughout his career deserved better than to watch him simply fade away into irrelevance and bitterness. They had given him their laughter, their time, their money, and their affection. He owed them at least an attempt to give something meaningful back. Recently, Paul Hogan made a rare appearance at the premiere of Crocodile Dundee, the Encore Cut, a special edition celebrating over 40 years since the release of the classic film. His return to the media surprised and moved fans who were thrilled to see the legendary actor once again. And it was during this event that Paul began to understand the depth of connection that still existed between him and audiences who remembered him fondly despite everything that had happened. In an interview at the event, Paul shared, "I never thought my little film would become a cultural icon. I'm incredibly grateful for the love and support from audiences throughout the years. But these words, spoken spontaneously, began to crystallize into something larger. The recognition that gratitude could be more than just polite acknowledgement. It could be the foundation for art that served others rather than himself." The physical challenges that would make such a project seemingly impossible began to seem less like insurmountable obstacles and more like problems to be solved with creativity and determination. Paul's muscle condition meant he couldn't perform physical comedy or action sequences, but it didn't prevent him from sharing stories, wisdom, and authentic human connection. The financial considerations that had begun to constrain Paul's lifestyle actually provided additional motivation for the project, not because he needed money, but because he wanted to demonstrate that creativity and meaning could transcend commercial concern. This would be art for art's sake, service for service's sake, love for love's sake. The concept that gradually emerged was simultaneously simple and ambitious. A documentary-style project that would allow Paul to speak directly to his audience about what their support had meant to him, what he had learned from his successes and failures, and what wisdom he hoped to pass on to future generations of dreamers and entertainers. The project would be Paul's opportunity to control his own narrative for perhaps the final time, to share his authentic self rather than the characters he had played, or the celebrity persona that had sometimes obscured his genuine personality. It would be his chance to be completely honest about his mistakes, while celebrating the magical moments that had made everything worthwhile. Most importantly, the project would be Paul's gift to the people who had given him so much, a way of saying thank you that went beyond words to include genuine vulnerability, hard-earned wisdom, and the kind of authentic human connection that had always been his greatest strength as an entertainer. The title that came to him, The Last Thank You, captured both the finality of his situation and the gratitude that would drive every decision about how to structure, produce, and share what might be his final creative statement. This would be Paul Hogan's farewell to fame, but more importantly, it would be his love letter to everyone who had made the journey possible. The decision to move forward with the project, despite obvious obstacles, represented a fundamental choice about how to spend whatever time remained. Would Paul continue to retreat into isolation and regret, or would he find the courage to step forward one more time to risk failure and embarrassment for the chance to create something meaningful and last? Chapter 2, Assembling the Dream Team. Creating a meaningful final project at 85, while battling chronic health issues and working with limited resources, required Paul Hogan to approach collaboration with a wisdom and humility that his earlier success had never demanded. This would not be a traditional Hollywood production with unlimited budgets and star power. It would be an intimate creative partnership based on shared vision rather than commercial calculation. The first challenge was finding collaborators who understood that this project was about service rather than profit, meaning rather than fame, and authentic expression rather than marketable entertainment. Paul needed people who would treat his final creative statement with the respect and care it deserved, while bringing professional expertise to ensure the project achieved its artistic goal. The approach to potential partners was completely different from anything Paul had experienced during his peak career years. Instead of agents negotiating deals and studios competing for his participation, Paul was essentially asking people to join him on a creative journey with uncertain commercial prospects but profound personal significance. The directors and producers who responded to Paul's vision were primarily people who had grown up watching his work and understood its cultural impact, or industry veterans who recognized the rare opportunity to participate in something that transcended normal entertainment business considerations. These were people motivated by artistic integrity rather than financial gain. I, like everyone else, used to watch the Paul Hogan show. I think I was like 7 or something when it started and was always just a huge fan, recalled one potential collaborator, representing the generational connection that made certain partnerships feel both natural and meaningful. Working with Paul wasn't just a professional opportunity, it was a chance to honor childhood memories and cultural touchstones. The production team that gradually assembled around the project included documentary filmmakers who specialized in intimate, character-driven storytelling rather than big-budget spectacle. These were people who understood that Paul's current value lay not in his ability to perform elaborate comedy routines, but in his capacity for authentic human connection and hard-earned wisdom. The technical requirements for the project had to accommodate Paul's physical limitations while maintaining professional standards that would honor both his legacy and the audience's expectations. This meant creating shooting schedules that respected his energy levels, designing interview setups that minimized physical strain, and developing production methods that could capture emotional truth without demanding physical performance. The financial structure of the project reflected its purpose. This was not about maximizing profit, but about ensuring that everyone involved could participate without financial hardship, while keeping costs minimal enough to preserve the project's independence and artistic integrity. Paul was essentially funding his own farewell, investing his resources in gratitude rather than accumulation. The creative approach emphasized collaboration over hierarchy, with Paul serving more as storytelling partner than traditional star performer. The goal was to create space for genuine conversation and authentic reflection, rather than scripted performance or manufactured drama. The location decisions prioritized meaningful settings over visually spectacular backgrounds, places where Paul felt comfortable and authentic rather than locations chosen for their production value or symbolic significance. This included his Venice beach home, favorite walking routes, and settings associated with important memories from his career and personal life. The interview format was designed to feel more like intimate conversation than formal documentation, allowing Paul to speak naturally about his experiences, while providing enough structure to ensure that important themes and stories would be addressed thoroughly and thoughtfully. The editing philosophy emphasized authentic moment over polished presentation, preserving the natural rhythms of Paul's speech and thought process, rather than creating artificial pace or dramatic tension. The goal was to capture Paul as he actually was, rather than as audiences might remember him or expect him to be. The distribution strategy focused on reaching audiences who would appreciate the project's intent rather than maximizing viewership or commercial return. This meant seeking platforms and partners who would present the work with appropriate context and respect, rather than simply as another piece of entertainment content. Perhaps most importantly, the collaborative approach ensured that Paul's voice and vision remained central to every decision, while benefiting from the expertise and fresh perspectives that his partners brought to the creative process. This was truly Paul's project, but it was also a team effort that honored both his legacy and the contributions of everyone who helped bring his final vision to life. Chapter 3: Confronting the Mirror of Time. The most challenging aspect of Paul Hogan's final project was not the physical demand of production or the creative complexities of storytelling. It was the emotional requirement to honestly examine a life that included both extraordinary achievements and devastating failures, moments of pure joy and periods of crushing regret, choices that seemed wise at the time but revealed themselves as catastrophic in hindsight. In recent public appearances, Paul appears thin and somewhat frail but continues to maintain the optimistic and humorous spirit that once made him a beloved figure. But the project demanded that he go beyond maintaining appearances to reveal the authentic person beneath the public persona, including the pain, uncertainty, and hard-earned wisdom that came from living fully and making mistakes honest. The process of reviewing footage from his career peak was both inspiring and heartbreaking, reminding Paul of the energy, confidence, seemingly limitless possibilities that had characterized his younger self, while highlighting the dramatic physical and emotional changes that the intervening decades had brought. It was really confronting to see footage of him looking so prime and sexy and smart and gorgeous, observed one collaborator who witnessed Paul's reaction to archival material, capturing the complex emotions that arise when someone confronts the gap between who they were and who they have become. The decision to include rather than avoid discussion of Paul's most difficult periods, the tax scandal, the divorce, the estrangement from some of his children, the health challenges, represented a conscious choice to honor his audience with complete honesty rather than convenient omissions or self-serving narratives. The conversations about his relationship with Linda Kozlowski required particular courage, as Paul struggled to find language that acknowledged his mistakes and regrets without betraying the privacy of someone who had chosen to build a new life away from public scrutiny. "I loved her deeply, but sometimes love just isn't enough. We tried, but in the end we couldn't walk the same path," became his way of accepting responsibility while respecting boundaries. The reflection on his role as a father brought some of Paul's most emotional moments, as he grappled with the recognition that his pursuit of career success and romantic fulfillment had often come at the expense of relationships with his children that could never be fully repaired or replaced. The examination of his relationship with Australia required Paul to confront the complex feelings of betrayal, forgiveness, and renewed appreciation that had characterized his evolving connection to his homeland throughout decades of celebration, persecution, and gradual reconciliation. The discussion of his health challenges demanded that Paul find ways to acknowledge his physical limitations and mortality without seeking pity or dwelling on circumstances beyond his control. The goal was to demonstrate grace under pressure rather than to document decline or generate sympathy. The analysis of his entertainment legacy required Paul to evaluate not just the commercial success of his projects but their cultural impact, their influence on how the world saw Australia, and their contribution to conversations about identity, masculinity, and cross-cultural understanding. The exploration of his financial situation needed to balance transparency about the costs of his legal troubles and personal mistakes with dignity about his current circumstances and gratitude for the resources that remained available to him. The examination of his current daily life required Paul to find meaning and satisfaction in routines and relationships that might seem mundane compared to his former glamorous lifestyle, but which actually provided more sustainable and authentic sources of fulfillment. Perhaps most challengingly, the project required Paul to articulate what he had learned from his experiences in ways that might benefit others facing their own struggles with success, failure, love, loss, aging, and mortality. This meant transforming personal pain into universal wisdom without minimizing the cost of the lessons learned. The process of confronting himself so completely and publicly was emotionally exhausting but ultimately liberating, allowing Paul to release some of the guilt and regret that had consumed so much of his energy while finding ways to frame his experiences as contributions to larger conversations about what makes life meaningful and worthwhile. Chapter 4. The Wisdom of Gratitude. As Paul Hogan delved deeper into his final project, he began to discover that gratitude was not just the theme of his farewell statement, but the key to transforming a life marked by loss and regret into something that felt complete and meaningful. The act of systematically acknowledging what he had received from others became a form of healing that no amount of therapy or medication had been able to provide. "I'm incredibly grateful for the love and support from audiences throughout the year," Paul had said spontaneously during a recent public appearance, but the project allowed him to explore this gratitude in depth, examining specific moments when audience response had sustained him through difficult periods and given him strength to continue when everything else seemed to be falling apart. The process of revisiting fan letters, reviews, and testimonials from people whose lives had been touched by his work revealed the profound impact that entertainment could have beyond simple amusement or commercial transaction. Paul discovered stories of people who had found courage in Mick Dundee's confidence, hope in his humor, and connection in his representations of Australian character and value. The gratitude extended beyond professional relationships to encompass the collaborators, crew members, and industry professionals who had contributed to his success but rarely received public recognition for their essential role. Paul's project became an opportunity to acknowledge the directors, writers, producers, technicians, and support staff whose talent and dedication had made his achievements possible. The examination of his relationship with Australia evolved from complicated feelings about persecution and forgiveness into profound appreciation for a culture that had shaped his values, informed his humor, and provided the authentic foundation for characters and stories that resonated with international audiences. "Actually, I did the survey and did 10 countries and asked what they knew about Australia. It was famous Australian and it was Mick Dundee," Paul reflected, but rather than seeing this as a limitation or burden, he began to understand it as an extraordinary privilege. The opportunity to introduce millions of people to his homeland and to serve as an unofficial cultural ambassador. The gratitude for his son Chance became central to Paul's understanding of what truly mattered in life, as he recognized that their relationship represented his most important achievement and his greatest source of hope for leaving something meaningful behind. "I got custody, which I want. Paul's son Chance, he's great, he's very funny, sense of humor, he's a great kid." But the project allowed Paul to explore the depth of this relationship and its significance in his current understanding of success and fulfillment. The appreciation for the financial resources that had sustained him through difficult periods and continued to provide security in his declining years became an opportunity to discuss the relationship between wealth and happiness, the responsibility that comes with privilege, and the importance of using resources in service of values rather than simply accumulation. The gratitude for the healthcare professionals, physical therapists, and support staff who helped him manage his chronic conditions allowed Paul to acknowledge dependency without shame, while recognizing the dedication of people who chose careers in service to others. The appreciation for the quiet pleasures that now structured his daily life, morning coffee, sunset walks, good books, meaningful conversations, revealed how gratitude could transform ordinary experiences into sources of profound satisfaction that had often been overlooked during his busier and more dramatic years. The acknowledgement of lessons learned through pain and failure became a way of finding meaning in experiences that had seemed purely destructive at the time they occurred. Paul's willingness to be grateful even for difficult experiences demonstrated a level of wisdom and acceptance that transformed victimhood into empowerment. The gratitude for Linda's role in his life, despite the painful ending of their relationship, allowed Paul to honor what they had shared while accepting responsibility for what had gone wrong without bitterness or blame that served no constructive purpose. The appreciation for the forgiveness he had received from Australia, from some of his children, and from audiences who had continued to support him despite his mistakes, demonstrated the power of second chances and the possibility of redemption even after serious failure. The project itself became an expression of gratitude in action, Paul's investment of time, energy, and resources in creating something meaningful for others rather than simply focusing on his own comfort or concerns during his remaining year. Chapter 5: Messages for Tomorrow's Dreamers. One of the most meaningful aspects of Paul Hogan's final project was his determination to use his hard-earned wisdom to provide guidance, encouragement, and realistic perspective to future generations who might follow similar paths from obscurity to fame, success to failure, and hopefully toward authentic fulfillment that transcended external achievements or public recognition. The advice that emerged from Paul's reflection on his career journey emphasized the importance of staying connected to authentic values and relationships, even when success creates pressure to prioritize image, profit, and public approval over personal integrity and genuine human connection. Before I got into television and entertainment, working as a bridge rigger was a huge advantage because it gave me a perspective. God Almighty, I was scraping to pay the rent when I was 30. You imagine the courage it took for him to climb off the bridge, go on that Paul reflected about his own transition from ordinary working life to entertainment career, offering encouragement to people who doubt their ability to pursue dreams that seem impossible from their current circumstance. The emphasis on courage as the essential ingredient for meaningful achievement became a central theme in Paul's message to younger people. Not the fearless confidence that ignores risks and obstacles, but the mature courage that acknowledges difficulties while choosing to move forward anyway, understanding that growth requires willingness to risk failure and embarrassment in pursuit of authentic goals. The discussion of his relationship mistakes provided valuable lessons about the importance of maintaining perspective about what truly matters in life, even when professional success creates opportunities and temptations that can distract from fundamental relationships and responsibility. I'm not a great husband. I'm good early, and then it's sort of like my insolence, but I'm a little bit of a hermit. Paul admitted with characteristic honesty, offering younger men insight into the self-awareness and emotional work required to maintain healthy relationships despite the pressures and ego challenges that come with public success. The exploration of his parenting experiences, both successful and failed, provided guidance about the importance of prioritizing family relationships, even when career demands seem urgent and immediate, while family concerns seem like they can be addressed later when more time is available. The father and son often spend time together, sharing simple everyday moments, became Paul's way of demonstrating that meaningful relationships are built through consistent presence and attention, rather than grand gestures or expensive experiences that substitute material provision for emotional availability. The analysis of his financial journey from poverty to wealth to more modest circumstances offered practical wisdom about the relationship between money and security, the importance of living within sustainable means, and the dangers of allowing lifestyle inflation to create financial pressures that compromise artistic integrity or personal value. The discussion of aging and health challenges provided perspective on the importance of taking care of physical and mental health throughout life, rather than assuming that youth and energy are infinite resources that can be squandered without consequence. The examination of his relationship with fame offered insight into both the benefits and costs of public recognition, helping younger entertainers understand how to maintain privacy and authentic relationships while meeting professional obligations and public expectations. The reflection on creative integrity provided guidance about the importance of staying connected to original motivations and values even when commercial pressures encourage compromise or artistic choices driven by market considerations, rather than authentic expression. The discussion of failure and redemption offered hope to people facing their own mistakes and setbacks, demonstrating that it is possible to learn from failures, make amends where appropriate, and find new sources of meaning and contribution, even after serious errors in judgment or behavior. The emphasis on gratitude as a source of strength and perspective provided practical guidance for maintaining emotional balance and life satisfaction regardless of external circumstances or comparative achievement. The encouragement to pursue authentic dreams rather than following paths chosen to meet others' expectations or social pressures became Paul's way of validating the courage required to live according to personal values rather than external approval. Perhaps most importantly, Paul's message emphasized that every life contains opportunities for growth, contribution, and meaning that extend far beyond professional achievement or public recognition, and that the most important measures of success are often the most private and personal ones. Chapter 6: The Challenge of Physical Limitations. Creating a meaningful final project while battling the progressive physical deterioration that had become Paul Hogan's daily reality required innovative approaches to storytelling, production methods, and performance techniques that honored both his limitations and his remaining capabilities. This challenge became an unexpected source of creative inspiration rather than simply an obstacle to overcome. Paul has been battling health issues including muscle loss and chronic pain, which have made his daily life increasingly challenging, but rather than allowing these limitations to prevent or compromise his final project, Paul and his collaborators developed production methods that worked within his constraints while maintaining professional standards and authentic emotional impact. The muscle atrophy that had weakened Paul's physical strength was addressed through careful scheduling that respected his energy levels and physical endurance. Shooting days were structured around his natural rhythms, with the most demanding interviews scheduled during times when he typically felt strongest and most alert. The chronic pain that was Paul's constant companion required production teams to be flexible about locations, timing, and duration of recording sessions. Rather than forcing Paul to adapt to conventional production demands, the project was designed to accommodate his needs while ensuring that discomfort didn't interfere with genuine emotional expression or authentic storytelling. The mobility issues that made travel and complex location work difficult were solved by bringing production capabilities to Paul rather than requiring him to go to traditional studio or location setting. His Venice Beach home became the primary production base, with additional shooting at nearby locations that were easily accessible and comfortable for someone with his physical limitations. The voice changes and reduced vocal stamina that accompanied Paul's aging were addressed through record techniques that captured the authentic character of his current speaking voice while ensuring clear audio quality that honored both his message and his audience's ability to understand and connect with what he was sharing. The reduced physical presence that resulted from his weight loss and muscle deterioration was handled through lighting, framing, and visual techniques that focused attention on Paul's eyes, expression, and gestures rather than emphasizing physical changes that might distract from the emotional content of his communication. The fatigue that limited Paul's ability to sustain long conversations or maintain consistent energy levels throughout extended recording sessions was accommodated through shorter, more frequent recording periods that allowed for natural breaks and recovery time without compromising the depth or authenticity of the content being captured. The medication schedules that structured Paul's daily routine became part of the production planning process, with shooting schedules designed around times when his pain management and other medical needs were optimally addressed without interfering with his mental clarity or emotional availability. The need for physical assistance with some daily activities was handled with dignity and discretion, ensuring that Paul received necessary support without compromising his privacy or creating uncomfortable dynamics during creative work. The unpredictability of Paul's daily condition, some days better than others in terms of energy, comfort, and mental sharpness, required production flexibility that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining momentum toward completion of the project. Perhaps most importantly, the production team learned to recognize and celebrate what Paul could do rather than focusing on what he could no longer accomplish. His wisdom, humor, emotional intelligence, and storytelling ability remained intact even as his physical capabilities declined. The creative solutions that emerged from working within Paul's limitations often produced more intimate and authentic results than might have been achieved through conventional production method. The constraints forced innovation that served the project's artistic goals while respecting Paul's dignity and comfort. The experience of creating meaningful work despite significant physical challenges became part of the project's message about resilience, adaptation, and the possibility of continued contribution and growth even when circumstances seemed to limit options and opportunity. The collaboration required to accommodate Paul's needs also demonstrated the power of teamwork and mutual support in achieving goals that might seem impossible when attempted individually, providing additional layers of meaning to a project that was fundamentally about human connection and shared purpose. Chapter 7: Healing Through Storytelling. As Paul Hogan immersed himself in the process of creating his final project, he began to experience something unexpected and profound: the therapeutic power of transforming personal pain into universal story, private regret into public wisdom, and individual experience into collective understanding. The act of telling his story with complete honesty became a form of healing that no medical intervention had been able to provide. The process of examining his life through the lens of storytelling rather than judgment allowed Paul to find meaning and purpose in experiences that had seemed purely destructive when they occurred. The failed relationships, public scandals, health crises, and professional disappointments began to reveal their value as sources of hard-earned wisdom wisdom that could benefit others facing similar challenges. I always thought I was doing the right thing, but sometimes that's not enough to make someone stay. Paul had reflected about his marriage to Linda, but the storytelling process allowed him to explore this recognition more deeply, understanding how good intentions without emotional intelligence and authentic communication could lead to devastating misunderstandings and missed opportunities. The examination of his relationship with his children from his first marriage became an opportunity to acknowledge mistakes without wallowing in guilt, to accept responsibility while also recognizing the complex circumstances that had contributed to family difficulties that no single person could have prevented or resolved alone. The discussion of his tax troubles and legal battles provided a framework for talking about the importance of professional relationships, the complexity of financial management for high-income individuals, and the ways that success can create vulnerabilities and risks that ordinary people never have to navigate. The exploration of his health challenges allowed Paul to model grace under pressure while providing practical insight into the aging process, chronic illness management, and the psychological adjustments required when physical capabilities decline more rapidly than mental capacity or emotional needs. The reflection on his entertainment career became an opportunity to discuss the difference between authentic success and artificial achievement, the importance of staying connected to original motivations even when external pressures encourage compromise, and the satisfaction that comes from work that serves others rather than simply advancing personal interest. The analysis of his relationship with fame provided valuable perspective on the benefits and costs of public recognition, the challenge of maintaining private relationships while meeting public expectations, and the importance of developing identity and self-worth that extend beyond external validation or achievement. The examination of his current daily life demonstrated how gratitude and acceptance could transform ordinary experiences into sources of profound satisfaction, how meaningful relationships could provide more lasting fulfillment than professional accomplishment, and how aging could be approached as opportunity for growth rather than simply decline. The process of sharing these stories with his production team created immediate opportunities for connection and mutual understanding that reminded Paul of his fundamental capacity for human relationship despite the isolation that had characterized much of his recent experience. The act of speaking honestly about his mistakes and regrets without seeking excuse or minimization became a form of confession that provided psychological relief from guilt and shame that had been consuming emotional energy for years. The opportunity to acknowledge the people who had contributed to his success but rarely received public recognition became a way of expressing gratitude that had been unexpressed for too long, providing satisfaction that came from giving credit where it was due rather than taking it where it wasn't deserved. The chance to offer guidance and encouragement to younger people pursuing their own dreams allowed Paul to transform his experience into contribution, his wisdom into service, and his pain into purpose that extended beyond his own concerns and interests. The discipline required to tell difficult stories with honesty and insight provided structure and meaning to days that might otherwise have been consumed by pain management, medical appointments, and the gradual decline that characterizes advanced age. Perhaps most importantly, the process of creating something meaningful for others reminded Paul that his life retained value and purpose despite his physical limitations, financial constraints, and the personal losses that had seemed to define his recent experience. Chapter 8: The Gift of Completion. As Paul Hogan's final project neared completion, the profound satisfaction of finishing something meaningful while he still could provide the kind of deep fulfillment that had been missing from his life for many years. This was not just the completion of a creative work, it was the completion of a life's journey that had begun with impossible dreams and would end with authentic contribution to others. "I hope you enjoyed the little journey with me," Paul had said during one of his recent public appearances, but his final project represented his opportunity to extend that journey and share its deepest insights with people who might benefit from his hard-earned wisdom about success, failure, love, loss, and the possibility of finding meaning even in life's most difficult chapter. The editing process revealed how much material had been captured and how rich the conversations had become as Paul grew more comfortable with the vulnerability required for authentic storytelling. The challenge became selecting the most meaningful moments rather than finding enough content to fill the planned duration. The review of footage showed Paul at his most genuine and insightful, demonstrating that his essential appeal had never been dependent on physical comedy or elaborate performance, but on his capacity for authentic human connection and his ability to find humor and hope even in difficult circumstances. The decision about final structure and pacing reflected Paul's desire to honor both his audience's time and attention while ensuring that important themes and messages received adequate development and exploration. This was not entertainment for entertainment's sake, but communication with purpose and meaning. The process of selecting archival footage and photographs to include in the final project became an opportunity to celebrate the best moments of Paul's career while providing context for his current reflections on what those experiences had meant and what he had learned from. The creation of a final personal message to his son, Chance, provided Paul with the opportunity to share his deepest hopes and advice for the next generation, while ensuring that their relationship would be documented and preserved regardless of what the future might bring. The inclusion of messages from collaborators, friends, and family members who had been part of Paul's journey added depth and perspective to his own reflections, while demonstrating the network of relationships that had sustained him through both successful and difficult periods. The technical post-production work was approached with the same attention to authentic expression that had characterized the recording process, ensuring that the final product reflected Paul's genuine personality and voice rather than artificial enhancement or manipulation that might compromise the project's integrity. The distribution planning reflected Paul's desire to reach audiences who would appreciate the project's intent while avoiding commercial pressures that might compromise its artistic integrity or authentic purpose. This was art in service of human connection rather than product designed for maximum market penetration. The promotional approach emphasized the project's value as genuine communication rather than celebrity content, encouraging potential viewers to engage with Paul's message rather than simply consuming entertainment product featuring a famous person. Perhaps most importantly, the completion of the project provided Paul with the profound satisfaction of having used his remaining time and energy in service of something larger than his own concerns, creating value for others while finding peace with his own life's journey and its mix of triumphs and failure. The knowledge that he had been completely honest about his mistakes while celebrating what was worth celebrating gave Paul a sense of completion and closure that no amount of therapy or self-reflection had been able to provide. He had told his story authentically and completely. The understanding that his project might provide encouragement or simply entertainment value to people facing their own challenges allowed Paul to see his current circumstances not as decline or failure but as opportunity to serve and contribute in ways that honored both his experience and his audience's trust. The completion of his final project represented Paul's transformation from someone who had been primarily a receiver of attention and appreciation to someone who was actively giving back, creating a sense of balance and purpose that had been missing from his recent experience. Chapter 9: Legacy of Authentic Connection. As Paul Hogan prepared for the release of his final project, the true legacy of his remarkable journey from bridge worker to global icon began to crystallize around themes that transcended entertainment industry success or celebrity achievement. His life story had become a testament to the power of authentic character, the importance of genuine human connection, and the possibility of finding meaning and purpose even in life's most challenging chapters. While time and health may no longer be on his side, Paul Hogan remains a vivid symbol of a golden era, but his final project demonstrated that symbolism could evolve into something more valuable, the real-time example of how to age with dignity, face mortality with grace, and use remaining time in service of others rather than simply seeking comfort or avoiding pain. The response to early screenings and previews of the project revealed the hunger that audiences felt for authentic communication from public figures, honest discussion of life's challenges and reward, and guidance from someone who had experienced both extraordinary success and devastating failure without losing his essential humanity. The letters and feedback that began reaching Paul as word of his project spread demonstrated the profound impact that honest storytelling could have on people facing their own struggles with relationships, career challenges, health issues, financial pressures, and the universal human experience of aging and mortality. The conversations that the project generated about masculinity, emotional expression, family relationship, and the meaning of success provided evidence that Paul's willingness to be vulnerable and honest had created space for others to examine their own lives and choices with greater clarity and self-acceptance. The international response to the project revealed that the themes Paul explored were universal despite being rooted in his specific Australian experience and particular entertainment career. People from different cultures and backgrounds found relevance and value in his reflections on love, loss, achievement, failure, and the search for meaning. The younger generation of entertainers and public figures who cited Paul's final project as inspiration for their own approach to career and personal development demonstrated that authentic leadership could transcend generational boundaries and provide guidance that remained relevant despite changing circumstances and cultural context. The academic and critical analysis of the project recognized its contribution to discussions about celebrity culture, aging in the public eye, and the relationship between entertainment and genuine human communication. Paul had created something that worked both as entertainment and as cultural document. The therapeutic impact that creating the project had on Paul himself became part of its legacy, demonstrating that artistic expression and authentic communication could provide healing and meaning even when physical health was declining and external circumstances seemed to offer little hope for improvement. The model that Paul's final project provided for other aging entertainers and public figures showed how creative work could continue to serve meaningful purposes even when traditional performance capabilities were no longer available. Art could evolve with the artist rather than simply ending when youth and energy faded. The strengthened relationship between Paul and his son Chance that resulted from the honest communication required by the project demonstrated how authentic expression could heal family relationships even after years of distance or misunderstanding. The reconciliation with Australia that the project facilitated showed how honest acknowledgement of mistakes, combined with genuine appreciation for cultural roots, could repair relationships that had seemed permanently damaged by scandal and disappointment. The financial success that the project achieved despite its non-commercial intentions proved that audiences were willing to support authentic communication when it was offered with genuine intent and artistic integrity, providing hope for other creators who wanted to prioritize meaning over profit. The critical acclaim that recognized both the project's entertainment value and its contribution to important cultural conversations validated Paul's decision to risk vulnerability and honesty rather than maintaining safe distance or artificial image management. Perhaps most important, Paul's final project established a new model for how public figures could approach the final chapters of their lives and careers, not as decline to be hidden or managed, but as opportunity for service, wisdom share, and authentic connection that could provide meaning and purpose regardless of physical limitations or past mistakes. Epilogue: The Last Thank You. As the Venice Beach sunset painted the Pacific in shades of gold and amber on what would be one of Paul Hogan's final days of active creative work, the man who had entertained millions around the world sat quietly in his familiar chair, surrounded by the equipment and collaborators who had helped him create something truly meaningful with whatever time and energy he had left to give. "I hope you enjoyed the little journey with me," Paul had said to audiences throughout his career, but his final project represented the completion of that journey, not just the entertainment career that had made him famous, but the deeper human journey of learning to love, to fail, to forgive, and to find meaning in both triumph and tragedy. The project was finished, but more importantly, Paul was finished, not in the sense of ending or giving up, but in the sense of completion, wholeness, and the profound satisfaction that comes from having used one's gifts and opportunities in service of something larger than personal gain or comfort. Although no longer actively involved in the entertainment industry, Paul Hogan expressed a desire to complete one final project to thank his fans before officially retiring, and that desire had been fulfilled with a depth and authenticity that surprised even those who knew Paul best. The thank you had become something far more precious than gratitude. It had become a gift. The house in Venice Beach that had been both sanctuary and prison would now serve as the place where Paul had found his voice again, where he had discovered that he still had something valuable to offer, where he had learned that aging could be about contribution rather than simply decline. The relationship with his son Chance that had sustained Paul through his darkest years had been strengthened and deepened through the honest communication that creating the project had required. The legacy that mattered most was not the films or fame, but the love and wisdom passed from one generation to the next. The father and son often spend time together, sharing simple everyday moments, and these moments had been enriched by Paul's renewed understanding of what truly mattered, his acceptance of his own limitations and mortality, and his commitment to being fully present for whatever time remained. The Australia that had once seemed lost to scandal and controversy had been reclaimed through honest acknowledgement of mistakes and authentic expression of appreciation for the culture that had shaped him. Paul was going home, not geographically but spiritually and emotionally. The entertainment industry that had moved on without him would remember his final project as proof that meaningful work could be created at any stage of life by anyone willing to be authentic, vulnerable, and committed to serving others rather than simply promoting themselves. The audiences who had supported Paul throughout his career received his final project as the gift it was intended to be. Honest communication from someone who had experienced both the heights of success and the depths of failure, someone who had learned valuable lessons about what mattered and what didn't, someone who cared enough to share those lessons with complete honesty and genuine love. The bridge worker who had become a legend had completed his final construction project, not a physical bridge spanning water but an emotional bridge connecting human hearts across the gaps of age, experience, culture, and circumstance. The last thank you had become a lasting contribution to the ongoing human conversation about how to live with meaning, love with integrity, and age with grace. Paul Hogan's final project proved that every life contains opportunities for service and contribution that extend far beyond professional achievement or public recognition. The last thank you became his first gift to a future he would not live to see but had helped to shape through his courage, honesty, and commitment to authentic human connection. As the cameras stopped rolling and the equipment was packed away, Paul sat quietly watching the ocean that had witnessed so many of his life's pivotal moments. The work was done, the thanks had been given, the gift had been offered, the bridge was complete. The boy who had dreamed of entertaining the world had grown into a man who understood that the greatest entertainment was authentic human connection. The greatest performance was genuine vulnerability, and the greatest success was using whatever gifts you possessed in service of love, truth, and hope for others. The last thank you had become the final chapter of a remarkable story, but more importantly, it had become the first page of whatever would come next for everyone who received its message of courage, resilience, and the endless possibility for meaning in every human life, regardless of circumstances or limitation. Paul Hogan's final gift to the world was proof that it's never too late to say what matters, never too late to serve others, and never too late to transform personal experience into universal wisdom that outlasts any individual life and continues to inspire long after the final curtain falls.